We are so happy to have you, Angela. Welcome to Montclair.
Very happy to be here. Looks very cute right now. I was walking around, I don't know, is it downtown?
Yes.
It was, those Netflix Christmas movies? I was like, this could be a Netflix Christmas town. Very cute.
It could be. It's cute. I love Montclair more in the summertime. I
Okay.
think we have so many parks and when you get tired of being in Brooklyn, come over here, okay?
I live in Harlem, but
You live in Harlem.
yes.
That's even better. I grew up in Harlem. Anyway, when you get tired of Harlem, come to Montclair. So I think the plan is going to be that we're going to talk for a little bit to warm you all up. And then I'm going to ask Angela to read a little bit from the book. And we'll keep talking. And then we'll leave enough time so that everyone, if any of you have read the book, you can ask questions, or even if you're just curious about anything that we talk about. So how does that sound? Okay. So give me a sense, how many people have read the book? All right. Okay, well, that's good. Okay. Because I was like, should we just spoil the book for everybody? No, look, everybody looked at me angry. It's okay. All right. So when I was here last month, my moderator had no notes. And I was so impressed because I'm such a nerd. I always write my notes. So I wanted to start actually. So I was listening to some of the interviews you've done since the book came out. And one of the things that I learned was that you realized you wanted to be a writer when you were 6 years old,
Yes.
which I think is kind of astonishing. So I thought we could start with just your relationship with books and how, like at such an early age, you could already tell this is what you wanted to do.
When I was an early reader. I don't really remember like not being able to read. So whatever that is, time, like when do people remember things? Whatever age that is, I already knew how to read. I had an older, like a sister 3 years older than me, so whatever she did a thing, I just did the thing at the same time. But when I was 6, my father has 6 sisters, and one of them gave me a journal when I was 6, and I just really loved writing in it. And I knew from then that this is like what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I didn't come from like a house with a lot of books, but I spent a lot of time in the library. This was, like the 80s and the 90s where people would just leave their children in the library. I'm sure some of the librarians here remember that. Now the parents are nominally still watching, but they would just leave small children in the library, and my mom used to do that sometimes. And there was a period of time in college where my mom convinced me that I should be a journalism major because it seemed more stable. This was obviously like late 90s, right before, but by the time I started school, in the 2000s, all my journalism professors were like, this industry is dead because the internet is here. So, so then I was like, oh, good, I can just be an English major and stop pretending. So I've always just been on this path.
I love that. I was thinking as I was listening to some of your interviews, I was thinking about my own relationship with reading because I became a voracious reader first in Spanish. But I was here already. I was like 10. And, I started reading in one of my classes, and then I started going to the library, just like you. And I had these 2 librarians that would give me books, and I was maybe 12 or 13, and it's like this really tall black guy, and then this little short white woman, and they would like fight with each other to give me books, and but they were giving me like the bluest eye. And like they would give me this like, like Faulkner. And I just remember being 13 and like still learning English. And like that's kind of like the way that I came to learn English really largely was through these books that were so beyond my comprehension. So, one of the things that I loved so much about this book was that it's obviously in conversation with a lot of different other books. So for those of you who haven't cracked open the book yet, because you're going to buy it after we talk. The book is in 4 parts, and there's an epigraph that opens the book, and then there's each of the sections has its own epigraph. So Angela, I just wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about your relationship with other writers, and specifically the ones that you chose for those quotes. Like, what was it that you were thinking about we as readers would get from those connections?
One of the several projects of the novel is it's just thinking about like Black womanhood in general. So the writers are Audre Lorde, the Los Angeles icon, poet Wanda Coleman, Toni Morrison, Gail Jones, and June Jordan. And for me, like all of those people were important at different points in my like writing life. And thinking about there, there's like those writers that really feel like their job is to like tell some story that no one has ever told, right? Or like or they feel the pressure to like they need to somehow cover some ground that like has never been covered. Half the time I suspect these people have not read enough, because if you read enough you realize that's a weird ambition, because people have been thinking about everything for a long time and they've been writing about everything for a long, long time. So for me, it's really comforting to think that like I don't have to reinvent anybody's wheel. I can just think about what do I think I can contribute to this already very rich conversation about Black womanhood and friendship and interiority. And so those epigraphs are me. Some part of it was like these were just things that were on my cork board, and I was lucky enough to get permission for all of them, which is like its own thing. But also it was these are writers that like I also kind of want to subtly remind the reader that like we've been doing this. Like it's not this new thing. And for me, that's really comforting and exciting to think about being part of a conversation instead of like feeling I need to be innovating or even pushing something forward. Like if that happens, that's lovely, but I just want to hang out, like I just want to write something that feels like worthy to be in a conversation with these women.
Well, I was especially moved because the book is centrally concerned with friendship, the friendship of 4 women. And then there's like an extra character who is central to the story. That's the sister of one of them. And you're, as a reader, you're kind of following along with these women for like 20 years of their lives. And so, when I first, because I don't know how you all read, but I have a tendency to like start with acknowledgments because I'm like, who you gotta think, Angela? so I start at the
I feel like that's very writer, like gossipy of you. I don't know if the average person does that, but I know writers love to do that.
maybe not, but I start at the back and then I look at the structure of the book. I'm like, well, what are they like? Is it 2 parts? Is it 3 parts? And so when I come into the book, I was already thinking about like the quote from Sula, and I was like, ooh, juicy, because that was messy. I was like, that relationship between those 2 friends, and then the bird catcher, which I read when it first came out a few years ago. But I think Gail Jones is brilliant. So I already was like coming into it being like, oh, this is like I'm already among friends in this book, right? Because like the poets too are like icons. So I just thought it was just such a lovely way to like just also like you're saying, like put the book in conversation with other books, but also like acknowledge and nod like these icons that have come beforehand. I thought that was really lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And what else did I want to ask you? Oh, one thing that I wanted to ask you, I mean, I guess it's like maybe we save this one for later, but I was interested in like hearing how like since you started reading when you were so young, how do you feel like your relationship to fiction writing is different than like your relationship with language? Because I feel like this book touches on many different kinds of language. Like there's the internet and social media, and there's like the way you talk to each other and the way you talk to other people, family members. But I was curious about how you think like reading fiction from or just reading books in general. how that might have affected your relationship to language.
Well, I I grew up in LA County. I went to mostly schools in a city called La Puente, and I was in bilingual classes until third grade. So, because there was a large, mostly Mexican, but also like some Salvadorian, like immigrant population at my school. So they were like, I had peers who were voracious readers, but not in English, right? They were learning English. And so my relationship to language has always been one of trying to, like, just interest in what I don't know. Also, my dad is one of 13 children. My mom was one of four. I have like a very, very large family. So I've always had an interest in what I don't know and like how people talk around things. And in addition to going to a school with like a large Spanish speaking population, where I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley also has a large Asian American population, mostly Filipino and Chinese. And being like one of the only kids who didn't grow up in like a multilingual household has also been, again, this idea, this thinking of like what I don't know, but never from like a place of feeling excluded, but just like very curious. So my relationship to language and my thinking about what like a book can do has to do with figuring out different ways for readers to discover things. At this point, there's a lot of reviews, many unsolicited, that exist about this novel. And you know, I think especially now, it's really wonderful that I feel like there's such a huge and robust like online like reading community, but many people are really, the things that people are reading a lot are things that are, I don't want to say, what is the right way to put this? More straightforward, right? So there's not necessarily, like, people are not familiar with the tradition of like having to work for meaning in a book, but that's my jam, right? Like that's the kind of reader that I've always been, and sitting with like what happens with the accretion of meaning, like the pleasure is not just from the plot, right? The pleasure is also from the things that I thought were one way are actually another way, and like how an event can turn around. And I think that has to do with just how I grew up, right? If you have 12 siblings, there is no one story ever, right? And I am still learning some of these stories from other aunties, uncles' perspectives. And I'm, 40 years old. Stories that I eavesdropped on when I was like 8. And I'm like, that's actually not, there is no one story. And so that I think is related to just how I think about writing fiction, is about how when you sit with characters and you sit with a story, how the changes come not just from what happens next, but just how things are presented and whose eyes you're seeing things through.
Yes, I mean, I really, I guess one thing that I'm wondering about your relationship to books as objects, like, did you think of them as friends when you were growing up?
Um, I thought of I thought of I never got to keep them,
Oh, they were
because
library
they're the
books.
library. We didn't, it wasn't really until I was maybe in junior high or even high school that I started like buying books because I had like my own money.
Yeah.
But so I thought mostly of just like characters as like friends. I read the like Chronicles of Narnia several times, all of those books when I was in elementary school, and then in middle school I discovered Anne Rice, and so those like sad gay vampires were my friends in my head.
Mine too.
Yes. And it's so funny because now I'm like, there's a lot of sex in these books, but honestly, the sex was not the biggest things in those books at all to me. Probably because it was, sometimes people are so concerned about like young people having mature content, but it's like, are they even that pressed with the mature content? I was more like, will they ever speak to each other again? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love that you're talking about this relationship with language and like even this idea that I do think that there's something happening with especially the stars that people give to our books and how quick people are. Like, if it's not making me feel good by the end, it's like 1 star, you know? And I think that you're right, that sometimes when we're demanding of a reader, like a certain amount of labor, that I think that there is some readers, I feel like, push hard against that, but then other readers welcome it. I was reading this book, and there's one part that I found really moving, and I was like crying. And my kids are used to me reading and crying when I'm reading. And I was like very moved by one of the sections. I remember looking at the book and being like, "You are not my friend right now." I can't believe these characters are doing that. But even this idea too, that I think because there's a shifting point of view, like we follow these 4 women, but then there are times when the book is doing unexpected things and going into the point of view of characters that aren't those 4. And so for me, like, I had very much that sense of walking into a wilderness, and like, and later on you find like a quote that is very directly related to the title of the book, which is really lovely. But all along, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is just such an exciting thing to walk into a book and live inside of it, and like the terrain itself feels like like this kind of like unexpected, thrilling experience.
Thank
So
you.
can you talk about that? Like,
Well, I was actually thinking about this, I don't know, maybe earlier this week. I was thinking about what which kinds of writers we allow to be experimental, right? Or we allow to be avant-garde. And we see it that way. We don't just see this is a mess, they didn't know what they were doing. Because it's like if if my name was Daniel, right? My first name was any kind of Daniel or John, then perhaps people would give a little bit more grace and assume that there is a grander design. But for some reason, I'm just a Black woman, there's an assumption that if I am sort of pushing the form, it's because I don't know what I'm doing or because I'm trying to trick somebody versus this is all like a design. But to be fair, rather than thinking that is just necessarily a sign of our times, I think the thing that is a sign of our times is just people will tag you in their like raggedy review. But I remember like some of my aunts, when I was reading The Bluest Eye or whatever, Paradise, being like, oh, Toni Morrison's book, they're all just like depressing. They were saying the same things back then. It's just those were not the voices that they didn't have no Goodreads, they didn't have anywhere to have that outlet. So they don't live on anywhere. Although there were plenty of people who they spent time in major publications having really misread Morrison. You can find those archives easily. But there were always readers who wanted a more straightforward sort of, they wanted a story that just washes over them. Which isn't to say that this story is, I don't want to scare anybody. This story it is, I think, propulsive in a lot of ways. And I also think that I tell some good jokes. But this idea that like, if you're playing with form or with reader expectation, it is contrary to like, you're not in the business of pleasing the consumer. When I am a consumer who is like deeply pleased by that, especially when it all works.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I love that you're talking too about kind of the expectations, because I do feel like sometimes people pick up the books of Black women, and it's just like with women generally that maybe there is this expectation that you already know walking in what kind of experience you should have. So anything that ends up being different than that unsettles some people. But I don't know, like I've never been someone who needs like to be led by the hand. Like I like books where like the characters are complicated, where, with your book, I felt like there were like, it was cumulative. Like I feel like I was growing with these women as they were in their 20s and in their 30s, right? And into their I think that's it, right? Into maybe early 40s. Yeah, so But I really love that experience too, because the book, and I was thinking about that after I finished, because I was listening to it and I was reading it. Me and my book club, I have a few of us are here, and we're all like multi-format readers. So it was really interesting too, because there were some times where the language is just stunning. And I would be like, oh no, I need to go grab the book and like see it, like touch it, because it's so wonderful to like sonically to listen to, and there were like a couple of different readers in the Audible. But then there's also like the experience of you looking at it and being like, oh, this character, of course, they sound very different from each other. And so anyway, I think you're warmed up enough, right? Like, so maybe you can reach us to us a little bit from the
Sure.
beginning.
I'm just going to read. Am I going to read from the beginning? I realize we never gave a synopsis of this novel, but it is. It follows this group of friends over 20 years, from their 20s to their 40s, which you did say, and it's set mostly in New York and Los Angeles, and it begins in 2008, and it projects. Oh wow, I could be much louder. I will be moving forward. Sorry about that. It projects a little bit into the future to 2028. I'm going to read from a little bit in the middle of the book. So one of the characters' his name is Nakia, and we meet her in 2015, or we catch up with her in 2015. Unlike many Black Angelenos she knew growing up, Nakia Washington's family could not trace their lineage to Louisiana, Texas, or Mississippi. They had arrived in California by way of New Jersey. They were seaboard people, had been for generations, since an enslaved ancestor on her father Conrad's side, Anne, no last name, traveled from Maryland to Philadelphia in the early 1800s with the people who thought they owned her. She absconded into the city, thereby emancipating herself, family lore went. This intrepid ancestor had found shelter among the Black freedmen of Philadelphia and stayed inside one safe house or another for the better part of a year, not stepping into the sunlight or even venturing near windows. Nakia descended from a founding family of Black Newark, New Jersey. Anne, who eventually married a man named Washington, had the prudence after that first year in hiding to make her home outside of the city of her escape. Hers was a striving family, from washerwomen and day laborers to ministers and teachers, to many minor first Blacks. First Black assistant superintendent of schools. First Black nurse administrator at a large urban hospital. First Black president of a local credit union. First Black delegate to the Eastern Regional Convention for the Presbyterian Church. First Black woman graduate of Seton Hall's Business School, and so on. It was Conrad's family history, yet Nakia's mother, Juanita, daughter of an electrician, took special pride in relaying it. Nakia, on the other hand, tended to tell only her closest friends that she came from free people, not free from jump, who but a handful could claim that on this continent, but free for a good long while. Nakia's parents didn't come to Los Angeles to fulfill a dream of palm trees and swimming pools. They came for a short stint, dental school for her father, and stayed. They had been trying for a child for 12 years and got pregnant with Nakia's older brother, CJ, within a month of living in Los Angeles. That felt like reason enough. Plus, distance from their families helped them realize there was a world outside of the Vineyard and Sag Harbor, outside of social clubs and debutante balls, and that they preferred this new world while still benefiting from access to the old one. Conrad continued the Washingtons of Newark's minor first Black legacy on the other coast. First Black-owned endodontist practice in West LA. The Washingtons had graduated from Kitchens before Nakia's great-great was born. So why had she gravitated to this sweaty, often unglamorous work? Not even the work of poor pay but respectable stages, genteel maitre d's, and haughty chefs de cuisine, but regular old kitchen labor, the work of ugly shoes and baggy pants and no degrees necessary and stains no matter one's fastidiousness. Why work with one's hands, unless we're talking surgery or sculpture, when one didn't have to? Well, there were hands, and then there were hands. Hands for building houses, tapping trumpet keys, turning lathes, cradling newborns, hands that, with the operation of feet keeping time on a pedal below, guided fabric through the percussive needle of a machine, hands with greased fingertips that pulled kinks into cornrows, palmed basketballs, rubbed backs, sanded wood, broke bones. A tactile person, Nakia was destined to work in a field that required literal grasping, and she might have taken to any of these other hands pursuits, but for the adrenaline of cooking, the particular eroticism of shoulder brushing shoulder, language abutting language, hips bumping hips in the kitchen. By the time she graduated from culinary school, she could perform any task in a kitchen with proficiency, but none thrilled like expo. The first time Nakia was called to expedite was at her summer job at a soul food joint on Crenshaw before her senior year of high school. She was hired as a hostess, her mother permitted because the restaurant was less than a 5-minute drive from their home. Their home. Nakia had chatted up and won over the entire staff within a week. All it took was a no-call, no-show for her to get to try her hand at serving, and once she was that close to the kitchen, pushing through the swinging doors to retrieve her orders, to refill condiments, to hide from tables, she understood that she was meant to be in close proximity to its energy, if not in it, hence Expo. That particular job, reading orders, making sure the plates created aligned with them, directing cooks to fire dishes at the appropriate time, thereby keeping the pace of service for everyone, was one that she thought she could do forever. One had to be despot and supplicant both while on Expo, barking out orders, pleading with testy cooks for substitutions, finagling for special cases. It was more akin to racetrack announcing than traditional public speaking, and her heartbeat revved when the first ticket sputtered out of the machine each shift. She was the youngest on staff, but on Expo, everyone was obliged to listen to her, to meet her eyes from time, to catch their meaning. She had never spent time alongside so many dissimilar people of age, country of origin, and perspective, and not being the type of child who gravitated to sports, she had never experienced the combination of competitiveness and conviviality that kitchen work engendered. The road to becoming the 28-year-old proprietress of the kind of breakfast, brunch, and lunch spot that people love to put on internet best of lists began with a bump of coke shared by a strange white girl 3 years earlier in that lesbian bar in New York City. Cocaine wasn't the end of the world, but Brandon, her girlfriend at the time, had been right. It wasn't her. In New York, she'd found herself reaching for pastimes and postures that had nothing to do with who she actually was. Untethered was how Juanita put it when Nakia had called her that night from 12th Street, her heart racing. You're an independent girl, Nakia, and you can thrive anywhere, but there's no need to force yourself into an untethered life, she'd said. You have people, you have family. You can come home and accomplish what you want to accomplish. Thank you. Thank you.
That was lovely. I love that part.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm gonna jump around a little bit because I feel like one of the things that that section calls to mind to me is, you know, just like the way in which when you're in your 20s, you're just trying to figure out like what you're gonna do with your life. And like some of the characters are like in a rush to become adults. Like you can feel that they just want stability, and some don't. So I was thinking a lot about the fact that this book took almost a decade and you became a mother during that time. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, like your own changes and how the book changed as you were changing.
So the first thing you talked about was the way that there are like some characters who seem like much interested in feeling like they want to feel like grown-ups, right? And Nakia is a character who in some ways like wants that, like she's very professionally driven. I purposefully tried to have a mix of like ambition in the characters and his friend group, and also like being a person who, as we talked about, knew what I wanted to be when I grew up very early in life and was very focused on it. It's a thing that can cause conflict in your like social circles, right? And so she is Nakia knows that she wants to be like a restaurateur, even though she would call it a proprietress, since like high school. And then there are other people, like her very close friend Desiree, who is very adamant that she doesn't want to do anything when she grows up for many reasons, but she just is not interested in sort of like, she just wants to be able to pay her bills, right? She's not interested in like being a professional, like a striver in that way. And this means it's almost time for questions. Is that what's happening? Okay.
Cannot possibly be time for questions. All right, all right.
But
Yes, of
okay.
course, of course.
Librarians will keep you on task. But yes, and so for the second part of your question was about
Just about how like your own life and the changes
Oh,
as you became a mother, you experienced different parts of your life changing, how that affected the direction this book took.
honestly, I feel like the things that happened in my personal life, I don't know if it affected the way that the book is like developed as much as the things that have happened in like, American political life over the past 10 years. I began thinking about this book like in the summer of 2016. And then by that fall, I always knew I wanted to project into the future. But, after like 2016 elections, I was like, oh, okay, it's going to look different than I thought. And there was a period of time where I just was like not working on the book, or I wasn't working on any of the parts that were like set more in the future. And then I had to basically think, the more that I thought about like how 2016 happened, and the more that we had the first like Trump administration, I thought about more than it being about like these like watershed, like singular moments. It is about trends, and a lot of the things, like the trends of increased isolation because of social media, increased disinformation, and like heightened distrust in the government. All of those things are trends that predated 2016, and I predicted would continue, like the increased sort of militarization of police in some of the most ostensibly progressive places in the country. I really thought about those things more than like who is going to be in the White House, because thinking about that like in 2018, for instance, just felt paralyzing. But thinking about what are the things that feel very baked into American life and how are they changing us were things that I felt confident I could put in a book. And I mean, of course, I would hope they don't come to pass, but they seem very likely that they could.
Yes. Well, yeah, so we're ready for your questions. Who has any questions?
It's a real pleasure to see you and listen to you. I was a big fan of the Turner House, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through The Wilderness. And what I'm fascinated by, and I don't know if you can say, maybe it's a secret, but I don't, with no spoilers, do you think we'll learn? Just you can just be yes or no. Will we learn more about Desiree and Danielle's relationship? So I'm at the point where Nakia is having friends over, Monique. So you see what I'm saying? And so I'm just wondering if I'm going to get some information on that. I'm going to read regardless, but that fascinates me.
I think you will.
I was actually hoping you'd say more, but that's good. That's good. Okay.
You did say you could say just yes or no.
I said that, but I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it.
Okay.
So I like to talk about the audiobook version of The Wilderness. Can you talk a little bit of how you picked your narrators? It's my understanding that they're both middle school friends of yours, and you also narrate parts of the book. Could you talk about what that experience was like?
So when I was in middle school and I was reading the vampire novels, I had two like closest friends who both wanted to be actors. I did not ever want to be an actor, but they enlisted me in many a like performance thing. Like we were just kind of the three like nerdy black girls, like artsy girls. We were like the co-captains of the cheerlead. I mean, not the cheerleading, not the cheerleading, the drill team and like dance team. And they had me singing in musicals, but I was mostly like just moving my lips and like no sound was coming out. They were singing, they could sing. And these are Asian Naomi King, who was on How to Get Away with Murder, and she was nominated for an Emmy for her supporting role in Lessons in Chemistry. And she stars in one of my favorite newer holiday movies, Boxing Day, which I highly recommend. I just rewatched it over the weekend. It's really good. It's called Boxing Day. I think it's on Netflix. And then the actor and TV writer Ashley Nicole Black, who was in a Black Lady sketch show and is most recently has been in the writer's room for Shrinking. So it's not completely that rare because we grew up, in an LA area for like them to actually be able to do the things that they wanted to do. But it felt to me really like if I'm going to get them to read any book, if I'm going to be able to pitch this successfully to my editor, it needs to be like this book about friendship. And they were very excited to do it. And we were selected, speaking of end of year lists, as one of the top 20 by Audible audiobooks of the year.
Margaret works at Audible. I think we.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for planting that question then. But I read just a small amount, which I was forced to do by them. They thought it would be more fun, and they were right. I think it is more fun that I read a little bit. But it's strange because like we had a really great director, but what it takes to make a good audiobook is not what it necessarily takes to write a good book. So she was like, I need you to say that word as if you hadn't italicized it. I'm like, but I did not italicize it. So I don't want to say it like that. But I did. But it sometimes took me multiple takes.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your process as a writer. Like, I'm a writer, so I'm always interested in people in their writing lives. Like, what is your process like? I mean, are you a morning person? Are you night? And this happened over 10 years and you had a child in the middle. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I used to have a much more exciting answer before I had a child. And, I am historically before like a morning person, like I want to start writing before I talk to anyone. But I noticed that the earlier that I woke up to write, the earlier that my child would wake up. So now I'm just like I have a 5-year-old, so when I pay or send her to school, when she is not at home is when I work. And when she is at home is when I don't work.
Hello. This was my first novel that I read by you, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank
I read
you.
it like over the weekend. The experiences that these women have are, even though it's a fiction book, is very realistic. Like January's relationship experiences. Like sometimes you want to be like, girl, no, don't do that. But it's realistic that she will go through those experiences. And then the ending with Nakia, this person.
Don't spoil it.
I don't want to spoil. I'm not gonna spoil, but just her experience at the ending of wanting to help your community, but then that could be backlash on you. So I just want to know your experience in still telling the truth through your books, and not hiding from it, and not kind of like being on edge about it, but confronting it with the truth.
I think it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, which is like, do I think the job of me, not saying every writer, but the kind of writer that I am, is to foremost, it's not necessarily to please a reader in the traditional sense of you feel fine at the end. I think part of it is to make you feel uncomfortable, and sometimes to make you feel like you want to throw the book across the room. That's okay. I hope you pick me back up though, but that's okay. And I think that is, I don't know. I think there were things in my first novel, which you haven't read, which is okay. that had to do with the fact that it was a family kind of like the one that I grew up in, and the fact of how young I was, that I felt like nobody could get hurt, nothing bad can happen. It needs to end literally with the word hope. And you just sort of grow up and you realize that life, like mortality is real. And also it feels, if you write, I don't write fantasy, if you write realism, it feels, and I lost a lot of people, especially in the last 5 years in my life. Those people, they didn't do anything wrong, you know, to pass away. It feels disrespectful to the people that I like love and lost, to never put anyone in harm's way, to never have characters have real struggles, to never have a character who doesn't know how to break up with like a boring ass boyfriend. Those things are real, you know? Yeah.
Hi. So this morning I was rereading a review. It was a good review of the book. And something came to me that didn't come to me when I was actually reading the book, which is this idea, and you were just kind of edging along it there, that everything's going to be all right. And it's kind of embedded in us, and it's certainly embedded in our culture. And then at some point, either early or late, you realize everything isn't going to be all right, like the things you were talking about just then. And then you spend probably the rest of your life figuring out how to live with that. And so I just wondered if that resonates with you or if I just made it all up.
Well, I think more than me thinking about everything's going to be all right or not, I think about like no one is coming to save us, right? It's us. And I think that one of the meditations when I say the book is a book about friendship, I think about that like in a sort of, yes, like in this friend group way, but also I think about it in the way of like the book is about community and who we think we're willing to be in community with. A lot of the characters, you know, think about their purpose in life and like, am I doing good? Am I doing the right thing in my life? And as the book progresses, it becomes about how can you think a little bit bigger about who you're willing to sacrifice for, who you're willing to bring into what you consider community. I think about that a lot, obviously, you know, just like over the weekend, just random people in New York City decided that they did not want ICE to have a successful raid on Canal Street. And so ICE did not have a successful raid on Canal Street because hundreds of New Yorkers just decided, no, it's not going to happen. And I think that it's something that the fact that people have to make that choice, in one way it feels like everything is not all right, but the fact that people are willing to shows me that perhaps we can save ourselves. So, but you're right, that part of I think getting older is having to think about that scary reality of like there's no necessarily a happy ending, and even if we all figure out or try to save ourselves, it's not guaranteed that it's going to work, but it's better than not trying.
Thank you. Your characters are quite real, and the relationships are real. But I'm wondering, talking again about the process, did you know where they were going? Did they somewhere along the way in your head you're going, oh, this is going to happen to this one, and this one's going that way? How did they all end up like that?
I knew
How did
where
it
everybody
happen?
was going, except I won't spoil, but there is a chapter where there are no names, and it mostly happens in the middle of the night. That's the only chapter that I was like, oh, okay, we're going to be extra messy. But that is the only chapter that I was surprised that the characters found themselves in that situation. To be clear, obviously, I put them in that situation, but but it wasn't the plan from the beginning that the relationships would be complicated by those choices.
Hi, thank you. I know it's a book about friendship, but I also feel like there's so much about parenting and your relationship with your parents. And I wondered if you could speak about that. But also, I don't know that I've ever read a book that spoke so much about grandfathers and granddaughters, right? I was full off of just the first chapter. Like, I love Nolan for all of his complication. And so I just wanted to see if you could speak a little bit about the parental relationships, but also I think the grandparental relationship and a grandfather and his granddaughters was just really something quite unusual, and you did an amazing job with it. So thank you for that gift.
Thank you. I think, I don't know how like so much, obviously I had a child when I was working on the book. I had already known that there was going to be a character who had a child in the book, but perhaps it feels like more felt because I also had a child. The grandfather relationship it's interesting that that is the oldest part of the book. I wrote that part of the book, I think in 2012 or 11. And I thought of it back then as like it was just going to be an inciting incident. I don't think it's spoiling to say this. It is the first chapter. But we open with the character Desiree is accompanying her grandfather Nolan. They're in Paris because he has planned an elaborate end of life plan where he's like going to hang out in Paris for a few days and then go and have a medically assisted suicide in Switzerland. And I thought that this would be like the opening question, which is like, well, how do you remake a family? But in order to do justice to, I really don't like books where people die and then the characters like are over it in a matter of pages, or like time just passes so that you don't have to deal with it. But even if time passes, you're still dealing with it, right? Like that's just not how grief works. And so when I moved forward and I knew I wanted to focus on these friends, like in the absence of like what she can rely on as a family, Desiree is really like, that's why she's like the sort of glue of this friend group, or the one who's the most interested in like them being a friend group, is because she has like these losses. It just made sense that she would still be thinking about him, just like it made sense that she would still be thinking about her sister, even though this choice she made to accompany Nolan has estranged her from the sister. It doesn't mean you stop thinking about them. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
And then we have to stop. This is sort of, I know it's sort of obnoxious, but I read the Turner book and really loved it. Mm-hmm. And you've been very clear about how that was based on your father's family. And I need to ask that really boring, obvious question. Is this based on your friend group?
Oh, this is the one question I said that I didn't want Cleyvis to ask me. But it's okay, because you're not Cleyvis. It's okay.
I know it's not a great question, but I mean, I guess what I'm really wondering is there a friend group in your life that formed the nucleus or the germ, the seed for this book?
I've been really fortunate to have like a lot of really long-term friend groups. So there's the 3 A's, which is my middle school friend group. This is what Asia's mom calls us. She calls us the 3 A's. And then I have like my friends that I met like freshman year in college, and then I am a Delta, so I have like the people from my chapter from college, like the people who pledged at the same time as me. We're very close. And then I have my friends from graduate school who I'm very close with. So I have a lot of friend groups, and I would say mostly fun for them to read it, because I have one friend who, like, every single time she got to a new POV, she would be like, I'm this person. She's like, I know I'm Monique, I know I'm January, I know I'm Nakia, and it's like, so you're everyone.
Love that.
Yeah. So it's not, but I wouldn't say that it's even like a combination of all of these people, because I think also just the strange thing about writing in the age of the internet, and people just put all their business on social media. So it's like some of the like scenarios or just personality tics, I don't even know where I got them from, because people just emote. Like you just scroll and you see just like little snippets of people, being themselves on the internet. Yeah.
And please join me in thanking these two wonderful writers.
Thank you.